When you think of ancient Greece, you might picture epic heroes, wise philosophers, or maybe even those grand, dramatic movies. But what about their private lives? What was sex actually like for them, far away from the Hollywood cameras? Let's dive into the fascinating and often surprising world of ancient Greek intimacy. It's definitely not what you see in the movies. First, we need to understand that their whole idea of attraction was different from ours. For them, it wasn't just about men and women. They focused more on social status and age. The most celebrated relationships were often between an older, experienced man, called an Erastes, and a younger man, the Eromenos. This wasn't just about physical connection. It was a form of mentorship, where the older man would guide the younger one in politics, society, and philosophy. These relationships were seen as a noble part of a young man's education and entry into society. It was a completely normal and even celebrated aspect of their culture. So, what about relationships between men and women? Well, that was a different story, and it was mostly tied to marriage and family. The main purpose of marriage was to have legitimate children, especially sons who could inherit property and become citizens. Romance wasn't really part of the equation. Wives were expected to manage the household and be faithful to their husbands. Husbands, on the other hand, had much more freedom. This brings us to a surprising fact. The ancient Greeks didn't really have a concept of heterosexual or homosexual like we do today. Their society didn't categorize people based on the gender they were attracted to. Instead, the important thing was your role during the act. Being the active, dominant partner was seen as masculine, regardless of who your partner was. The passive role was associated with being younger or having a lower social status. This is a huge difference from how we often think about identity today. For the Greeks, it was about power dynamics, not personal orientation. Let's talk about the women of ancient Greece. Their experiences were very different depending on their social standing. A citizen's wife lived a very secluded life, often confined to a specific part of the house called the Gyneceum. Her interactions with men outside her family were extremely limited. Her primary duty was producing an heir for her husband. Affection and pleasure were not considered priorities in a marriage. However, there was another class of women called the hetairai. These were highly educated companions, almost like modern-day courtesans. The hetairai were skilled in music, dance, and conversation. They could attend symposiums, the all-male drinking parties, and engage with men on an intellectual level. Famous hetairai like Aspasia of Miletus were known for their intelligence and influence, advising powerful statesmen. They had a level of freedom and education that was unimaginable for most wives. The ancient Greeks also had a rich world of mythology filled with stories about love and desire. Their gods and goddesses were anything but shy. Zeus, the king of the gods, was famous for his numerous affairs with goddesses, nymphs, and mortal women, often using trickery and transformation to get what he wanted. These myths weren't just bedtime stories. They reflected and shaped how the Greeks thought about desire, power, and the often chaotic nature of love. Another surprising element is their openness in art. If you look at their pottery, sculptures, and vases, you'll find very explicit depictions of all kinds of intimate acts. For them, this wasn't necessarily shocking or taboo. It was just a part of life, and their art reflected that reality without much censorship. The number of surviving artifacts with these images shows that they were quite common and widely accepted in their society. So to sum it up, sex in ancient Greece was complex. It was tied to social status, age, power, and education in ways that are very foreign to us. It wasn't about love and romance in marriage, but mentorship and social status in other relationships. The rules were different, the roles were different, and the whole concept of identity was different. It's a powerful reminder that our modern views on love, sex, and relationships are just one way of seeing things, shaped by our own time and culture. We hope this look into the ancient world was eye-opening. There's always more to learn when we look back at history with an open mind. For more deep dives into the history and culture of relationships, make sure to subscribe to Sex Education Repo.